welcome to this installment of our series, Search the Word. And today we are talking about the remnant and its mission. What is the remnant and what is its mission? In order for us to understand the remnant and the context in which we are speaking about it, let's begin here. A remnant is something or someone that remains from a larger piece or a larger grouping. The word is generally taken from the understanding that when a sewer is using a cloth, a big cloth, they are able to use the cloth whatever is intended, and the small piece that remains, or the smaller pieces that remains, those that are cut off from the big piece, are then referred to as the remnant. This is a concept that we have seen throughout the course of the Bible, and in particular, one particular reference that we can mark is in the story of Noah. Noah is told for 120 years to preach that the flood is coming. And for 120 years he preaches while he builds the ark that truly a storm is coming. And God has commanded him to build the ark so that whoever wills to be saved will enter into the ark. 120 years passes and only Noah and his family of 8 enter into the ark, along with a horde of animals that God instructs and calls into the ark. The ark is then sealed, and the moment it is sealed, the people around begin to mock him. But a week later, 7 days later, a storm begins to brew. The earth erupts with water. Everything just breaks apart, and the majority of the people are outside of the ark. Noah and his family then become a remnant. And therefore the remnant in this context is a small group of people that remain worshiping God in truth and in spirit. Now, in our time, you will agree with me that we are living in a time that is close to the end. Everyone, including those who are not Christians, can attest to the fact that everything seems to be edging towards the end. And therefore, the question that we ought to ask ourselves is, where are we standing as far as the end of time is concerned? Are we part of the majority or are we part of the remnant? In Revelation chapter 12 verse 17, God speaks about his people in the end times, his people in the last days of Earth's history, the remnant of God in those days. He says, these are they who will keep the commandments of God. These are the people who will keep the commandments of God. All that he commands, they will do. They will live in harmony with his will. They will act in harmony with his laws. And also those who have the testimony of Jesus, those who can testify a living testimony of the life of Jesus, or of the impact of Jesus in their lives. I'm simply saying to us that God has a remnant in the last days of Earth's history that you and I can be a part of, or maybe I should say are a part of, if we have chosen him. How do we become part of the remnant church of God? How do we become part of the remnant people of God? By keeping his commandments and showing our allegiance to him by living in harmony with his precepts, and also by living our lives under the shadow of his hand and knowing that we are walking with a true testimony of his presence in our lives. Now, what then is the mission of these people that are God's end time people? In the book of Revelation chapter 14 verses 6 to 12, we find 3 angels there that hold in their hands 3 messages, or that herald 3 messages. The first angel speaks about returning to God, acknowledging that God is the creator and acknowledging that all peoples must come and worship God. It is a call to true worship, a call away from the worship of things and people, a call away from the worship of what our desires are, a call away from the worship of these many things, but to a true worship of God. The second angel then warns against the fall of the state of confusion that surrounds us, the state of many religious affiliations, the state of many denominations, the state of the spiritual confusion that confounds us. And it calls our attention to the fact that all of these systems, these false religious systems, are going to fall. And it says that we ought to acknowledge that when they fall, we ought to know where we will stand. The third angel says that we need to be aware that every decision we make, every action that we think of and set our minds to do, will be brought to judgment. Every action that we do will be brought to judgment. And hence it speaks about receiving the mark of the beast on our foreheads and on our hands. On our foreheads because we ought to think and act in a way that is reminiscent of the choices that we make on our hand, because everything that we do will be brought to judgment, and every decision and action that we make will ultimately throw us in whichever direction that that we would have decided upon. And therefore the call is upon you and me to make the choice, to choose Christ, to choose God, to choose to follow His law, to choose to follow His precepts, to choose Him above all. How do we show our allegiance to God, therefore? By keeping the commandments of God in their totality, not just a portion of them, but the commandments in their totality. God calls you and I to keep the law of God and have the testimony of Jesus, so that we can be God's end time people and fulfill His mission and the purpose for us in this time. Don't you, dear friend, want to be part of God's end time people? Don't you want to be a part of the people of God who will keep His commandments and who will exude the presence of God through their testimony? Don't you want to be a part of God's people who have a special mission and a special message for this time? A people who are preparing the world for the soon return of Jesus Christ and the ultimate consummation of His will and desire for humanity and for all creation. I invite you to make a decision for Jesus, to make a decision to choose God, to make a decision to follow His law. It is my invitation also that you continue to join us as we study the Word of God, as we search the Word. May God be with you, and may God bless you as we meet again next week. God bless you.